Well, I'm here with Eric Cousineau and Matthew Contos. Matthew is the Curator of Public Engagement at Center here in Santa Fe, which runs Review Santa Fe. And Eric is a photographer and also a full-time worker at Trader Joe's and a more than full-time single dad as well. Eric has been working on this project that was really a collaboration. It was inspired by an idea that he and Matthew put together. It's a project called Essential Worker, and he's been going around and photographing essential workers in the Santa Fe community. Matthew, how did you get involved?
Well, Center, like I think everybody, COVID hit. And so we were looking and thinking about what can we do and how do we respond to this. So on the curatorial side, it also was this kind of interesting moment for me to be like, what is essential for artists and what is essential art, or is that even a thing? And looking at that is kind of like, okay, I feel like if there is art being made now, it could be in this space, and how could that happen? So I brought that to Laura Presley, the executive director of Center, and like without hesitation, she goes, call Eric. He's perfect. He works there. His photography is on point. Like this is great. Just get it rolling. Of course, whatever you guys need. Then I emailed Eric and he was like, I'm all in. And it kind of evolved from there.
And so, Eric, you had been doing other portrait projects in the community. You had already been kind of going around the community, entering people's domestic spaces and photographing them. And now you're looking at this project with Center, this idea of photographing specifically essential workers. Where did it go from there?
The first portrait that I actually took was of my mailman. Mm-hmm. I was out getting mail. He was parked across the street. I was like, hey man, can I take your portrait for a project on essential worker? He's like, yeah, sure.
I love that story of that switch from really trying to work, you're trying to kind of work through all of these approvals within a company to just finding someone and person to person asking if you can take their portrait. This moment of human connection that I think maybe we're all craving so deeply right now became really the catalyst to, take this project in a different direction, right?
I have a friend that works at Del Norte Credit Union in the admin department. I emailed her asking if I could go into the banks to photograph. She's like, we're all for it, but you can't go inside. You have to shoot through the glass. So I did that. I got some interesting shots with my own reflection in it, trying to block and being able to see the person inside.
There are, of course, so many barriers, so many hurdles to actually capturing a portrait of someone right now, right? We're kind of divided by literal barriers. And so you were looking at how do you start to use those barriers in interesting ways to show either that separation or a bridge between people, right? Did that feel like an emphasis in the project, or maybe it was just a necessity? You were forced to work.
Yeah,
with
I had to go by their rules, and I just worked around them.
Matthew, back to you for a moment. You are as I said at the beginning of this little talk, you are the curator of public engagement at Center. That is a role that is about, again, human connection. And I would imagine at the beginning of this pandemic, as everything set in and stuff was shutting down and, Review was looking at potentially postponing to the following year, there's this enormous question of what your role becomes. And I think this is a really interesting and vital answer to that question. I was just thinking about how, of course, journalists have been declared as essential workers, right? News organizations are essential. And so photojournalists are considered essential. This is definitely a social documentary kind of project. Could you talk about your own view of your role at Center and how you were forced to adapt and how this project might fit into that new vision?
Oh, yeah, sure. It was strange. I think overall, we've been talking at Center a lot about how do we do more work that is in the community, that is more directly engaged. And to me, there was also this element of like, oh, great, this is really complicated. That's a great recipe for interesting art. It's not going to be about a commodity. It's not going to be about, you know, I don't know, prestige or elitism. Like this, the work that can be made in this that I think is meaningful has got to be about people and with people. And it's, if anyone's going to sort some of this out, it'll be artists who find creative ways to do it. So it was really this kind of, for me, this kind of feedback loop where, you know, I would kind of bring something to Eric, and then with his energy, I would get more. And so I think that's been a big impetus.
Matthew, did you and Eric collaborate on the statement that's on the Center website about essential worker? Because I love it. It's such a was that both of you?
Yeah, we worked together on that one. Yeah, yeah.
This was the really striking moment for me in the statement. It says, strangely enough, the majority of those deemed essential are also representative of low income positions that rarely offer health benefits, despite the increased risks of working in public spaces in the age of COVID-19. COVID serves in so many ways to illuminate social strata inequality, you know, racial inequality, economic inequality, which of course is intertwined. Could you talk a little bit about that sort of main thrust of the project? Because Eric, you can of course speak to this as well. Part of this portrait project is really showing people within their environments, and so you get all of these clues and cues to who they are and how they're living their working lives. I think that for me is a real source of fascination in this project. Could you speak a little bit to that, Eric, observing that as you go? Because I'm sure as an essential worker and as someone who is now documenting essential workers, you were probably thinking about this question a lot, the fact that these folks are at risk, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, in the beginning, it definitely was scary to go into work every day. Mm-hmm. Like you always had on your mind when I was walking into the building, I'm like, okay, today's the day that I'm probably gonna get coronavirus. Who knows? And you know, I go in to these other places where people are working and they have the same fear, but as the months have dragged on, like I noticed like people are kind of like a little more relaxed about it as I go into businesses. Like they're still wearing masks, keeping a social distance, but their attitude is a little lighter. They're not as uptight and anxious.
When you are face to face with that person, you've asked them to create a portrait, and it becomes almost a collaboration. They are in conversation with you about where and how they might pose and what they're going to show you, right? What angle you're going to capture and what's going to be around them within the portrait. Could you talk a little bit about that in the context of this project? How did that sort of dynamic work in terms of what people were trying to show you, the window into their world that they were trying to give you as an essential worker?
Well, I would go into the businesses. A lot of it, I just walked in and I would have my camera on me. I'm like, hey, can I take your portraits? And then I would explain the project. And as the project went on, I would have a few images on my phone and I would just flip through showing them what I did. And they're like, oh, awesome. Yeah, those look so cool. I want to get my picture taken. They're like, what do I do? And I would just start looking around the business and I would be like, okay, I want you to stand right there. Or like, what is your workstation? What do you primarily do? But I wouldn't really direct people. But this project, I really don't get to talk to people because they're busy working and I'm invading their space. So it's kind of like, I feel like an urgency to hurry up, do the portrait, and just let them get back to work.